Okay, good morning, everybody. We're live. Okay, today we're learning the Parsha of Joseph. Joseph is a very, very interesting character. How does this guy rise to become the most successful Jew in the history of our nation? How does this even happen? Think about it. Joseph becomes the most influential Jew in the history of the Jewish people. I mean, even Kissinger, who was just Secretary of State, right? You know that at the end of his life, he did teshuvah. He said that the two-state solution is never gonna work. Yeah, too little, too late. Unfortunately, tragically. Either way, Joseph was the prime minister, vice president of the world superpower. That's a lot. We've never had a Jewish vice president. We came close. And he's Shomer Shabbos. He keeps Shabbos too. This Joseph has tremendous depth to his character. He's a maverick. He's different to his siblings, and we can tell this right from the get-go. At the very first introduction to Joseph, we can tell that he's different to his brothers. At the opening of the Torah portion today, you'll find it on page 231. Page 231. We start off with Joseph's dreams right away. This guy's having dreams. His 10 brothers are all just normal, and he's having dreams about everybody else bowing down to him. Dreams of greatness, dreams of power, dreams of influence. You can tell that he's destined to great things. Though his father criticizes him publicly in order to quell the angst of his brothers, who are the subject of who are his subjects in his dreams, those who bow down to him. The first portion ends off with a very enigmatic ending. And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father guarded the matter. His father waited expectantly for the matter. So Jacob senses that Joseph is destined for great things, and he's going to try to figure out how to make that happen. A warm welcome to Hendrik from the Netherlands. So you just retracted your comment over there. You got a very, very nice prime minister now that is Geert Wilders, fearlessly standing for Israel. Very, very proud of your prime minister, Hendrik. Oh, he's working on it. Yeah, it's like Israel. They gotta piece together a puzzle, right? Okay. So what I'd like to focus on today is a bit of an enigma which relates to Joseph that might hold the code, might crack the code as to how it is that Joseph rises to this meteoric success. So there certainly is an element of nature within him, where Joseph is introduced with these dreams, right? By no fault of his own. He's just destined. He's born for greatness. He's having these dreams that he can't control. But there was also an element of nurture of his own efforts that seems to have impacted tremendously his meteoric rise to success. So to that, I'd like you to turn to page 233. 233. This is the second aliyah of the portion. Let's take a look at what happens over here. It's quite a sad story. His brothers, in the middle of the page 233, verse number 12, his brothers, except for Benjamin, left ostensibly to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. You know what Shechem is? Nablus. They call it Nablus when the Romans try to rewrite history. They try to call Shechem as if it was an Italian city, Naples. Arabs can't pronounce the letter P, so they say Nablus. That's why.
Minneapolis, new city.
Minneapolis?
Minneapolis.
Good. Okay. So they went to Shechem, but in reality, they saw it. By the way, Joseph is buried there to this day. To this day, Joseph is buried in Shechem. But in reality, they sought to be alone in order to privately discuss what course of action to take regarding Joseph's disturbing arrogance. Yeah. Israel sensed that Joseph's brothers had absented themselves in order to scheme out best to vent their jealousy and hatred upon him. However, he also sensed that somehow the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham in the covenant between the halves, that his progeny would be slaves in a foreign land, would unfold through this turn of events. This is becoming mysterious. Remember, Abraham, the grandfather, had a a vision of God, a covenant of the parts, where God says to him, your children will be strangers in a foreign land, and they will be tortured and abused for 400 years. Right? That was the prophecy of anti-Semitism, right? So he figures that he's willingly sending Joseph down there, prophetically realizing that this somehow is related to the destiny of the Jewish people. So Israel said to Joseph, now your brothers are pasturing in Shechem. Come, I will send you to check upon them. Joseph also knew that his brothers were probably scheming against him. Nevertheless, in deference to his father's will, he replied to him, here I am, Hineni, ready to do your bidding. At the time, they were studying the Torah's laws regarding the calf that must be decapitated in order to atone for an unsolved murder. Who was studying this Torah law? It was Jacob and his son Joseph. Joseph was the favorite child of Jacob. Might not be the best idea to have a favorite child. This might be a lesson learned here, even though it's very interesting that throughout the book of Genesis, every single rivalry, every single case of siblings, there's a favorite. And in every one of them, it ends badly. Think about it. God chooses Abel over Cain, right? You've got Isaac chosen over Ishmael, Jacob chosen over Esau, Joseph chosen over the brothers. The only functional siblings in the whole entire book of Genesis is the two sons of Joseph. Well, they're next book. They're in Exodus. But in Genesis, the very end of Genesis, you got Manasseh and Ephraim, the two sons of Joseph. And when Jacob comes to bless the two sons, what does he do? He goes like this. He puts the right hand on the younger son. And Joseph's like, no!
In every one of these,
Dad!
the firstborn is not a favorite.
Right, it's true.
So Jacob doubles down and he says, Yadaiti bani yadaiti, I know, my son, I know. Nonetheless, he'll be great too, but his younger brother is going to be much greater than him.
Is it the mothers who are fostering all of this too?
There's a lot to talk about. That's not what I want to focus about today, but it's an interesting discussion, you know. The mothers. Well, look, I would just say to you, yeah. I mean, certainly Rebecca was involved. Look, in the case of Cain and Abel, it was God's interference directly. In the case of Isaac and Ishmael, for sure was the mothers. In the case of Jacob and Isaac, the mothers for sure. For sure, Rebecca was the one that was manipulating the whole story. Joseph, in the case of Joseph, I mean, she wasn't there. She was deceased. It was kind of how he was mourning for her. It was sort of how he was mourning for his beloved wife by favoring her only son. Anyways, let's see what happens over here.
Rabbi,
Yes, sir.
Interesting throughout this, they call him Israel rather than Jacob.
Yes. Oh, you missed the sermon of Shabbos. You weren't here.
Well, and I was intending to be there too. I intended to, but
the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
I know. Thank you.
Jacob and Israel. Look, I went into a profound analysis.
It would have been very uncomfortable.
Why would I be
It was an analysis.
Oedipus.
What?
It was very heavy.
It was very heavy. It was Oedipus complex.
Oedipus.
Oedipus complex, which is our yearning for depravity and how that manifests in Jacob and Israel. It was I can't do it again right now, but it was.
I got to hear this.
Yeah, you got to come to show.
We have to hear this together.
We only do reruns.
All
right. All right, let's go a little further, guys. Here, so let's see what happens. So Israel then said to him, "But yes, you are correct that there's a very big difference every time Jacob and Israel is interchanged.
Right.
Very different. So the way I explained it on Shabbos is that Jacob represents action and Israel represents intention. Okay, Oedipus complex is okay in Israel, in the world of intention, but in the world of action, in the world of Jacob, it shall not fly." All right. So Israel then said to him, "Please go and see how your brothers in the flocks are faring, and bring me back a report." So this is the mission. It's a bit of a weird mission. He's like, just let me know how they're doing. I mean, seriously, that's what you needed to do. You're worried that your sons are trying to kill your brother, your other son, and you want to like just go check him out and see what's going on. And
Get killed or not. They don't know.
it's a little weird what's going on here, right? It's a little off, right? The commentaries tell us that he knew, that he sensed, right? He thus sent him to embark on a journey that would fulfill the profound prophetic vision of Abraham, who was interred in Hebron to this day. Joseph arrives in Shechem. The angel Gabriel, appearing in the guise of a man, found him wandering in the fields. The man, Gabriel, questioned him, saying, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "It is my brothers that I'm looking for." This is the call of the ages. I am searching for my brothers. How often does it happen that the people that you're talking to are anything but brothers? And you have to find the brotherhood within them. Right? As my brothers that I'm looking for, please tell me where they are pasturing. The man answered, "You refer to them as brothers, but they have clearly distanced themselves from such brotherly sentiments. For I heard them saying, 'Let us go to Dotan,'" which means legalities. And in consonance with the meaning of this place's name, they were seeking some legal pretext to kill you. So he gives them explicit warning. Your brothers are trying to kill you. Might not be the best idea to proceed. Despite this warning, Joseph remains true to his father's mission, followed his brothers, and found them in Dotan. They saw him from afar, and before he reached them, they conspired against him already to put him to death. Shimon said to his brother Levi, "Look, here comes that dreamer." Now remember, Shimon and Levi were the two. These guys are very action guys. Yeah, these guys went in. They were in Shechem. They were in Shechem when, and this is where Joseph is now, right? What did these guys do last week's Torah portion in Shechem? They massacred. You know, when Gentiles took a Jewish girl hostage, and were negotiating over her release while she was in captivity, Shimon and Levi, they went through deceitful negotiations to put the captors at a disadvantage. And then on the third day, when they were weakest, they came in and they slaughtered them all in an act of collective punishment. Oh, we have a round of applause.
I was wondering what that
In an
was.
act of collective punishment without leaving any survivors. And they took the possessions as well. So Shimon and Levi, what? This is how we deal with anti-Semitism, right? You show weakness, especially in the Middle East, not a nice place to show weakness, right? You give them a finger, they'll take an entire body. So this is what happened with Shimon and Levi. This is how they responded to anti-Semitism in Shechem, in the city of Shechem. And now Shimon is saying to Levi, "There goes the dreamer." You can see something's about to happen, right? So now, page 235, "Let us go and kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say a wild beast devoured him." So they'd come up with a legal pretext. They're like, "Look, we're going to say, "Memach zach nit wissendig." You know what that means? Anybody know that expression?
I believe I don't know anything about it.
Ze machen sich nit wissendig. You know this, right?
I'll pretend like I know nothing.
Right. But God said, "You would have done better to confront your father with your grievances rather than to presumptuously take matters into your own hands. We will see which succeeds," says God. This is an interesting third person here speaking. "Your plans or Joseph's dreams, which accord with my will." Reuven heard his brother's plan. Now, Reuven, this is what I spoke about on Shabbos. It was a little rated, what I spoke about on Shabbos. My sister-in-law gave me over the head for, she had the teenage girls here from the high school. She was like, she needed a what's it called, a rating before the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
What is it called? A
PG, RM.
So you told them to just grow up? Grow up.
You know, when it comes to sexuality in the Torah, there was a Rebbe, a teacher, who asked the Rebbe if he should skip over certain parts of the Torah from teaching the first graders. You know, certain verses are just horrific, you know, in their sexual deviance. The Rebbe said, do not skip over any verses, even when teaching children, as long as you ensure not to change your tone of voice.
You should owe that to your hero, DeSantis.
My hero?
Your hero.
What? Sorry, threw me off.
What's going on?
What was that?
You praised DeSantis on
He
Shabbos.
sent us guards. I say thank you. I'm not all or nothing. You know what I mean?
You would have thanked Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I would even have thanked Donald Trump if he sent us guards. What do you mean? He said,
Even? I thought he was your best friend.
There you go, sir. Okay, so back to this. So I'm saying is that when the Torah tells us stories, if you about sexuality, if you change your voice and you make it sound like you're embarrassed and you're turning red, then you're giving a very powerful subliminal message to the kids that there's something wrong with this. But when you can show them that sexuality is something which is normal, it's healthy, it's normal human behavior, and even deviant sexual behavior is normal to experience on an internal level, right? Which is what we spoke about on Shabbos. Then that's okay.
We have to,
You know what I mean?
Much bigger issue in prophets.
See what happens when you weren't here?
we have to have
Right.
a redo of this for us.
Yeah, I gotta tell Susan I can't come down.
Okay,
I
so
mean, if those girls read prophets and kings at any time, they get a lot worse.
of course. I'm not sure how I got into that. Oh, so Reuven, we said that Reuven, how I got into this is because Reuven is the full brother of Joseph, because the way I explained it based on the Zohar was that the Zohar says that the first night that Jacob married, he thought he was married to Rachel.
Right.
But really he was sleeping with Leah.
Right.
So the child born from that night's union was Reuven. So who was the father thinking about when he conceived Reuven?
Rachel.
He was thinking of Rachel. So the Zohar says that Reuven's spiritual mother is Rachel, because that's who the father was thinking about that night. Fascinating stuff, right? So Reuven heard his brother's plans, and he realized that if they killed Joseph, he, the firstborn and the spiritual full brother of Joseph, right, would be held responsible. He therefore rescued him from their hands as follows. He said, "Let us not strike him a mortal blow. Are we sure he deserves to die? Perhaps we are wrong, or perhaps he has some other merit that outweighs any capital offense he's guilty of. If such is the case, and we kill him, we will all be guilty of murder." In deference to the status as the firstborn, Shimon and Levi acceded to him, but they asked what they should do instead about Joseph's arrogance. Reuven then said to them as a compromise, "Do not shed his blood directly. Throw him into the pit here in the desert, so he will surely die, but do not lay a hand on him." In truth, Reuven suggested this course of action in order to rescue him from their hands and bring him back later when they were not around to his father. Reuven hoped that after his attempt at Joseph's life, Jacob would resolve the conflict personally. Okay. So that's quite the story here. It's quite embarrassing for us to know that our uncles were our fathers were so mean to their own flesh and blood. The question is, if Joseph knew that the brothers were trying to kill him, why did he proceed?
Yeah.
That's the big question here.
He thought
They
this
don't
was his
come back
path.
alive.
I mean,
know
you
that
got to be
those-
suicidal.
But he thought this was his path. God put him on this path. And he will succeed.
I mean, their father asked you to go find out if they're okay, you know? You could have stood at a distance and said, "I saw them, they were okay." You know what I mean? Back. Why do you have to go into their midst? Why would you have to do this? Maimonides addresses this question. And he says that you're not allowed to sacrifice your life. You're not allowed to put your life in danger except for 3 sins. Only if you stand to violate idolatry, adultery, or murder. That's the only time when you're allowed to put your life in danger. But otherwise, you're not allowed to put your life in danger. The Torah is given to us to live by it and not to die by it. And you shall live with the Torah. God doesn't want you dead. He wants you alive, which is actually part of the problem. Why it's so incredibly difficult to fight against Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Because these are people that are not afraid of death. They actually
Welcome it.
glorify death. That's what they do. You heard this Palestinian prisoner, the woman that was taken prisoner by for attempted murder. She was one of the prisoners released.
The idea.
In exchange for hostages, and she comes out after a couple years in prison, Israeli prison, and she's calling for murder of Jews. And what do you think they tell their kids? They raise them, they glorify death. They tell them you grow up to give us joy by becoming a martyr, right? We Jews are terrified of death, right? We glorify life. But the Arabs, that's what they do. It's in their culture. They glorify jihad and the virgins and everything else that they talk about. Where they say this world is I don't know, some sort of a horrible appetizer where the main course is up in heaven, and that's what you're supposed to be, right? As Jews, we the other way around. So for Jews, we don't. The only time you're allowed to get yourself killed is if you're about to take someone else's life, right? Whether it's a physical life and murder or a spiritual life that you're about to destroy, which is idolatry. Right? That's when it's your own spiritual death that you're about to bring about, idolatry. And that's why you die. You're allowed to get killed. And adultery is compared in the Torah to idolatry. Adultery is compared to idolatry, and that's why it's connected. But a regular mitzvah, your dad asks you to go and check on your brothers. You're not supposed to put your life in danger for that. So Maimonides answers the question like this. He says that the one exception when you are allowed to put your life in danger is when you know that there is a societal negligence. Malaise, nice. A societal malaise, when society is depraved in a particular area and you need to lead by example, that's when you're allowed to put your life in danger. In this case, Joseph recognized that his brothers were lax in honoring their father, right? Why else would they be wanting to murder his own son? And that's why he needed to show that he was willing to go and self-sacrifice on the command of his father, in order, without taking into consideration his own well-being, in order to counterbalance the laxity that was being exercised by the people of the generation with regards to this particular mitzvah, the mitzvah of honoring your father, right? That's how Maimonides explains it. Now, what's amazing to me here is that I find this very difficult to understand. I find it very, very difficult to understand because on a regular basis, like, how does that even answer the question? Like, okay, so you weren't supposed to put your life in danger because you're supposed to live as a Jew, but if other people are spiritually lax, then you could. The only way I can possibly understand this piece of Maimonides is in light of the teachings of Chassidus that we have already learned. The teachings of Chassidus tell us that if you live your life by the laws of nature, then you will be subject to the projections of nature. So if you are, let's say, fearful of war, right, then the outcome of war will likely be the natural projection of your firepower, your army versus the enemy's army, right? That's going to be the normal result. The stronger army, the better trained army, the better funded army, the better politically supported army is the one that's probably going to win. But if you come into war not fearful of the war, not fearful of the enemy, but fully trusting, al-tira, fearless, fully trusting in the master of the universe, then what have you done now? You've removed your allegiance from nature, and you've pledged allegiance to what? To Havaya, to God's infinite power. And when you do that, then you unleash God's infinite power upon yourself as well. This is a concept which is very, very difficult to understand if you're doing it for the first time, and you might be a child. So forgive me if this might be a little advanced. We spent a lot of time as a group here talking about this in Viodaita Moskva that we learned that, remember, it's quick to refresh your memories. Remember Abraham. So Abraham was thrown into the fiery furnace by King Nimrod because he believed in an invisible creator God, in a monotheistic and one God. That time, everybody, they were pagans. They believed in multiple gods. And, Nimrod himself, the king, he felt that he was a god. He wanted everyone to bow down to him. So he asked if everybody should bow down to him. And if anybody didn't bow down to him, then he would have to be thrown into the furnace. So Abraham was then about to be cast into the furnace. How did Abraham react? Was Abraham fearful of the furnace or not? So the Medrash tells us he approaches fearlessly, fully trusting in God Almighty. Al-Tira, he has this approach that he's fearless. Now, what happens when Abraham gets thrown into the furnace? He's miraculously protected where the fire burns just his ropes, and he's able to actually walk around inside of the fire. This is completely beyond the realm of nature, right? And it was as a result of this story that even King Nimrod, the wicked pagan king, was also moved to accept monotheism for a period of time, which is how Abraham became the father of monotheism, the most influential human in the history of the world. No other human being has influenced more human beings than Abraham, if you think about it.
Sure. Right?
Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all look at Abraham as their father. And that's even in our generation. Think about all the previous generations. If you go back 3,700 years ago, Abraham was extremely influential. Was as a result of this story, where the king himself mandated monotheism because of what he saw, that Abraham became so influential. But then there was somebody else over there. The king then asked, okay, if anybody else believes in the God of Abraham, we're going to be throwing him into the fire too. You know who else was there? Abraham had a brother by the name of Haran. Haran was his brother. Now, Haran had entered this scenario with a conditional faith. He said, if Abraham survives, then I believe in his God. But if he fails, then I don't. That's like being half pregnant, right? Maybe I'm pregnant, maybe I'm not. No. You're not, right? You're either in or you're out. There's no halfway in, right? So what happens to Haran? Haran says, me too. So Nimrod says, okay, throw him in. And what happens to Haran? He perishes. Why does he perish? Because he doesn't enter with the same fearless conviction, the same, unconditional fearlessness that Abraham does, because that's the principle that we learn. And it's a very, very powerful principle that we learn, a principle of divine reciprocity that we see it all the time. There's so many different places in Torah which talks about God is your shadow, how God follows your every move. And we learn about, know that which is above is from you. This is ethics of the fathers. There's a verse in Yechezkel, Ezekiel, which says the same principle. As a man below, so too does Hashem reflect upon him from above. This is a very, very powerful principle. When you manifest fear, then God reacts to you with nature. When you manifest fearlessness, then God reacts to you with miracles, right? This is how I interpret the story of Joseph. That Joseph enters this case not as a religious fanaticism where he says, well, the people don't know how to honor their dad, so therefore I'm going to teach them how to honor their dad, even if it puts my life in danger. My understanding was that Joseph enters this like he enters every other scenario which we encounter Joseph in the rest of the narratives of his life. He never once manifests a single time of complaint or bitterness. Now, Joseph is the most abused character in the entire Bible. Perhaps only Job was more abused than he, right? Probably, potentially. Not for sure. Job, not necessarily, because we can compare. They're probably in the same boat. But Job had a very, very different reaction than Joseph. What?
You said the same
boat.
Jonah.
I didn't say Jonah. I said Job.
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 Like job, J-O-B.
So let's go back to Joseph a second. Every single time that Joseph encounters a problem, his brothers are trying to kill him, he's happy. He's sold as a slave, he's happy. He's almost seduced by his master's wife, who then has him chucked into the jail for 10 years. He's happy. In the dungeon, what is he doing? He sees the two government ministers that threw him in the dungeon. Normal people would react with shout and fraud, right? He reacts. He says, what's wrong? What happened? You guys sad? Hello? Don't you know where you are? We're in the dungeon. No, he doesn't react. To him, wherever he is, he's in a happy place. Now, Joseph is not unemotional. Nobody cries in the Bible as many times as Joseph cries. He cries over his with his brothers. Always he cries with his brothers. You know, when he cries over his father, they're revealing himself to his brothers, and he cries on Benjamin. You know, he never complains. He's very, very emotional. He's the most emotional person that we know in the Torah. He's also the most abused person in the Torah. But it's this approach of Joseph, which is an approach of fearlessness wherever he goes. That is how I understand this answer of Maimonides about why Joseph proceeded into this trap. And nevertheless, look what happened in the end. He evaded the jaws of death. The natural projections would have been very, very low chances of mortality. Yet Joseph survives. Why? Because Havai is like God's divine intervention. And it's very interesting that as we track the story through the next couple weeks of the Torah reading, to have this in mind, that Joseph is just above nature. So when I said before at the beginning of this lesson that Joseph is different to his brothers, my understanding of that also is that Joseph's brothers were living on a natural plane of existence, which is the normal worldview. But Joseph had a higher worldview. Okay? And if we take that into consideration, we can begin to appreciate his meteoric rise to astonishing success. Okay, the Rebbe, by the way, challenges us all that we are supposed to do the same thing. The fact that the Torah teaches us about Joseph means that we too are capable of not being afraid of our problems, which is an amazing thing. You too can be like Joseph, and if you will, then you will rise to astonishing heights. The question is, how much will you divest of your ego like Joseph did, and how much will you truly trust and rejoice in what it is that Hashem sends you? How far will you mitigate your fear? Right? It's the degree, the intensity to which you do that, which reflects the proportionate rise to astonishing heights. The Rebbe just concludes over here by saying that it's always by divine providence that we read the portion of Joseph in the same time that we read the story of Hanukkah. Why is that? Because in the story of Hanukkah, the Jews were under tremendous threat. They were not allowed to study Torah and other prohibitions. It's one thing for them to keep strong in their faith, but did they need to go out to battle against the Greeks?
And they're all fellow Jews.
That was suicidal against their fellow Jews. It was suicidal to fight against the Greeks. I mean, think about it, like a little tiny band of band of Indians here. I don't know which Indian people you have around here, like a little tiny Zulu tribe, right? Fighting against the Seminoles, right? Fighting against the United States Army. I mean, seriously, like what chances do you have of survival? Yet the miracle, one of the miracles of Hanukkah, is that we were able to prevail against impossible odds. Why is that? Because the Maccabees, like Joseph, were able to manifest fearlessness in the face of impossible odds. Why? Because they subscribed to a higher power. And this is what we're celebrating on Hanukkah, coinciding with Joseph, to remind us that we Jews, this is a theme which recurs throughout the whole Torah, by the way, if you haven't picked it up yet, is that we Jews are not to be afraid. It's the most frequently repeated directive in Torah, stop being afraid. And after 3,700 years of exile, the time has come for us to stop being afraid. And when we watched the video on Friday about the Rebbe's directive to the Prime Minister, what was his name? Yitzchak Shamir. What was the Rebbe's one message? It kept them going over and over and over, the same message. Stop being afraid. Don't be intimidated. Right? If there's one message that we need to learn as a collective people over these nearly 4,000 years is break the cycle of insanity. How can you expect different results? Every single time that we trusted in God, we landed on our feet. Whenever we turned our backs on God, we failed. It's time now. Today, we're being tested. Today, we're being tested.
Isn't that the response to anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. It goes right there.
Instead of drain your cup, they're there. They're going to be there.
And,
They're afraid of them.
and the test is to see if you cannot be afraid. That's the test. Right now, friends, we're being tested. There's a war in Israel. And we, this moment, are being tested. How are you faring? If you're going to get a grade, like a needle, right? 0 to 100. Where's your needle in terms of your fearlessness factor? Your fearless factor, right? Where do you grade? Are you at 0 fearlessness? Are you at 100 fearlessness? Where are you? You've got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob behind you. You've got Joseph and the Hasmoneans. You've got every miraculous human being in Jewish history that has managed to prevail. You've got Haran, that brother of Abraham, who's kind of like in our situation. We're not sure. If we win this war, then I trust in God.
You got the 67 war, 73. You got the state of
in recent memory. Right? We've got miracles in our times. We've got the Soviet Jewry miracles, right? And yet, we're still not sure, right? Do you know how much criticism I get as a rabbi? Because I fearlessly go out with this message. I spread my message, no problem, like without fear, letting people know about what the spiritual reason for anti-Semitism is. And a lot of people criticize me. They're like, Rabbi, you're out of touch. The most important thing is to write letters to senators and congressmen. Rabbi, you have to pick up a machine gun. It's not enough to monitor the emotions in your hearts. But I'm not sure what I'm saying.
The Jacob lesson is all of the above.
Yeah, listen, we're being tested right now. And I believe we turn the tide of war.
Jacob.
We turn the tide of this war with our commitment right here, spiritually speaking. Just like intelligence in the back office somewhere in Tel Aviv underground is what's going to identify the locations of booby traps or arch terrorists. Just like a ship out in the Mediterranean Sea is what's going to strike a terrorist stronghold that is encircled, God forbid, IDF soldiers, right? Just like it's somebody off-site that's going to give us the information that we need to know where the hostages are. So too, it's us Jews off-site. We're not in the middle of the theater of war. We're a little removed from the theater of war, but we're right there because our mission is to be fearless. The soldiers are already being fearless. You got to be fearless in order to be a soldier. But what are we doing for the war effort? Are we adding anxiety to the war effort? Then get out of here. Stop it. You'd be better off sleeping, right? But if you want to introduce fearlessness to the war, then you're going to be bringing Hashem's intervention into the theater of battle. Just like Joseph was able to be miraculously saved from his brother's devious intentions. Just like the Maccabees were saved against impossible odds. We too will be spared from impossible odds. The whole Israel issued today a travel ban. You heard about this one?
No.
About where not to go. All the places where not to go. This is not pretty. 1 second. No, Broward County is not there. But here it is. Israel said right now, they said do not go to 10 countries. Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Brazil, Argentina, and Australia. Okay. The 3 very severe places not to go to are South Africa, Eritrea. Where's Eritrea in Africa? Where's it? Oh, Eritrea?
Is a province of
Okay.
Ethiopia, yeah.
And a few countries in Asia. I'm just translating from the Hebrew. These are level 3 countries right now.
Why? And who posted that?
This is it was actually posted on Yediot Achronot, which is Israel's newspaper, but it comes from the government. Point is that we're living in crazy times, and we might think that we're overwhelmed. Winston, what's it going in Indonesia? How's what do they say in Indonesia about the war? Tell us, like what are they saying? You know, are they standing with Israel, or where do they stand? You know, it's amazing. It's like South Africa. South Africa is experiencing. South Africa has like 120 rapes a day. They got hundreds of murders every day in South Africa. There's 40% unemployment in South Africa. Okay, but you know what the world's biggest problem is? Gaza. That's the problem. It's you can't make this stuff up. Bottom line is, friends, listen, we're fighting against impossible odds. Hashem has set this up to test us. We are being tested. We have to meditate. And we have to reach a point of fearlessness. We have to be beacons of light to all of our environments, that everybody should look at us, our friends and our neighbors and our grandchildren should look at us and say, there's a person that's fearless. There's an Abraham Jew. And we should inspire them to follow in our footsteps as well. Yeshua.